Have you ever had 24 hours to find someone before it was too late? My brother's phone pinged at 11:23 p.m. on a Friday with a text that made my blood go cold. You have 24 hours to find Juliet, or she dies. Clock started at 11 p.m. Good luck. I was watching Netflix when Damien burst into my apartment without knocking, his face white and his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold his phone. Someone took Jules, he said, his voice cracking on her name. Some psycho has my daughter, and I have until tomorrow night to find her, or... He couldn't finish the sentence. I grabbed the phone from him and read the message 3 times, looking for anything that seemed fake or like a prank. But the photo attached below the text showed Juliet, my 6-year-old niece, asleep in what looked like a basement, her favorite purple backpack beside her. This was real. Someone had taken her, and we had less than 24 hours to find her before something terrible happened. Did you call the police? I asked, already pulling on shoes and grabbing my keys. Damien nodded. They're at my house now. They said they'd start an investigation, but... His voice broke again. 24 hours isn't enough time for an investigation. They do interviews and leads and all this procedure stuff. Jules doesn't have time for procedure. I was already out the door with Damien following me. We drove to his house in silence, my mind racing through possibilities. Who would take Juliet? Damien was a high school teacher, not rich, no enemies that I knew of. His ex-wife Karen had custody most of the time, but she was traveling for work this week, which is why Jules was with Damien. When we got to his house, there were 2 police cars in the driveway and officers talking to Damien's girlfriend Monica in the living room. Detective Harrison introduced himself, a tired-looking man in his 50s who'd probably seen too many cases like this. Walk me through the evening, Detective Harrison said, pulling out a notebook. Damien explained that he'd picked Juliet up from school at 3:15 p.m. like always on Fridays. They'd gone to the park for an hour, then came home. Monica had arrived around 6 p.m., and they'd all had dinner together. Around 8:30 p.m., Juliet had taken a bath and gone to bed in the guest room. At 10:45 p.m., Damien had checked on her before going to bed himself and found the room empty, window open, screen cut. That's when he'd checked his phone and found the text from an unknown number. Detective Harrison wrote everything down slowly, methodically, and I wanted to scream at him that we didn't have time for slow and methodical. Any custody disputes with the mother? He asked. Damien shook his head. Karen and I have a good relationship. She's on a business trip in Seattle. I already called her, and she's catching the next flight back, but that won't be until morning. Detective Harrison asked about extended family, friends, neighbors, anyone who'd shown unusual interest in Juliet. Damien answered each question while I paced the living room, watching minutes tick away on the clock. 11:52 p.m. now. We'd already burned 52 minutes and learned nothing. What about the text? I interrupted. Can't you trace it? Detective Harrison gave me that patient look cops give civilians who watch too much TV. We've sent the number to our tech team. These things take time. It's likely a burner phone or a spoofed number, but we'll run it down. Time. That word kept coming up. Time we didn't have. I pulled out my own phone and started texting everyone I could think of who might know something. Damien's neighbors, his co-workers, parents of kids in Juliet's class. Most people were asleep and wouldn't see the messages until morning. Morning would be too late. Monica was crying on the couch, mascara running down her face. I should have checked on her, she kept saying. I walked past her room at 10 and didn't even look in. Damien sat beside her and put his arm around her, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He was thinking the same thing I was, that 10 p.m. was when Juliet was probably already gone, taken through that cut window screen, while we were all in the house watching TV. Detective Harrison's phone rang, and he stepped into the kitchen to take the call. I followed him, not caring if I was being intrusive. Uh-huh, he said into the phone. And the parents check out? Okay. Yeah, keep me posted. He hung up and saw me standing there. We're checking CCTV from surrounding streets, seeing if we can spot any vehicles leaving the area around the time of the abduction. We're also running background checks on everyone close to the family. That's going to take hours, I said, trying to keep my voice level. We have 23 hours now, less than a day to find a 6-year-old before... I couldn't say it either. Detective Harrison's face softened slightly. I understand your frustration, but we have procedures for a reason. They work. We will find her. His certainty should have been comforting, but it felt hollow. How many cases had he worked where 24 hours wasn't enough? How many families had he told, we'll find them, right before finding a body instead? I went back to the living room where Damien was staring at his phone like he could will it to give him answers. We can't just sit here, I said. We need to be looking, doing something. Damien nodded. But where do we even start? We don't know who took her or why or where they'd go. That's when Monica spoke up, her voice small. The text said you have 24 hours to find her. That means they want you to look. This is some kind of game to them. The words hung in the air, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. She was right. This wasn't a ransom situation where we'd get demands and instructions. This was someone who'd set a timer and was watching us scramble. The cruelty of it was staggering. Detective Harrison came back in with his phone. We've got CCTV footage from a camera 3 streets over. Dark van, no plates visible, heading east at 10:38 p.m. We're checking cameras further out to track its route. Damien stood up. East? That could be anywhere. The highway, the industrial district, the state forest? Detective Harrison nodded. We're narrowing it down, but I need you both to stay here in case there's another communication. We need you available. I looked at Damien and saw my own thoughts reflected in his face. Stay here and wait while someone else looked for Jules? Absolutely not. We gave it until 1 a.m., sitting in that living room answering the same questions over and over while officers came and went with updates that weren't really updates. The van had been spotted on 3 more cameras heading east before disappearing near the industrial district. They were canvassing that area. They were interviewing neighbors. They were doing everything by the book. At 1 a.m., 2 hours into the 24-hour countdown, I made a decision. I'm going to look, I told Damien quietly, while Detective Harrison was on another phone call. I can't sit here. Damien nodded immediately. I'm coming with you. Monica started to protest, but Damien cut her off. Stay here. If anyone calls or texts, if Jules somehow comes back, you need to be here. But I can't just sit. I'll lose my mind. We told Detective Harrison we were going to drive around the neighborhood, look for anything unusual. He didn't like it but couldn't stop us. We got in my car and started driving east, following the route the van had taken. The industrial district was a sprawl of warehouses and shipping facilities, most of them shut down for the night. We drove slowly, looking for anything out of place. A van that matched the description. Lights in buildings that should be dark. Any sign that someone was holding a child nearby? My phone buzzed with a text from one of Damien's neighbors. Just saw your message. There was a strange man watching your house yesterday afternoon. White guy, 30s, driving a gray sedan. Gave me weird vibes. I showed Damien and he called Detective Harrison immediately with the information. The detective said they'd look into it, but 30s white guy in a gray sedan was about half the male population. We needed more. At 2:15 a.m., we'd been searching for over an hour and found nothing. The industrial district was huge, and we were just 2 people in a car. This was hopeless. Damien's phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. You're looking in the right area, getting warmer. 21 hours and 45 minutes left. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. This person was watching us somehow, tracking our location. They can see where we are, I said. How? Damien looked at his phone like it had betrayed him. GPS? Are they tracking my phone? I pulled over, and we both checked our location settings. Everything looked normal, but that didn't mean we weren't being tracked. Maybe that's the point, Damien said slowly. They want us to find her. This is some kind of test or game. They're giving us clues. I looked at the text again, getting warmer. We were in the industrial district, which meant Jules was somewhere in this area. But the industrial district covered at least 5 square miles of warehouses and facilities. We'd never search it all in 21 hours. I pulled up a map on my phone and started marking every warehouse and building in the area. There were 83 of them. Even if we spent just 15 minutes checking each one, that was over 20 hours. We'd run out of time before we ran out of buildings. We need to narrow it down, I said. Think about who would have access to these places. Who could hold someone here without being noticed? Damien was quiet, thinking. Most of these warehouses are owned by shipping companies or storage facilities. You'd need a key or access code to get in after hours. His face changed. Wait, one of my students works at a warehouse out here. Trevor Ashworth. He's been weird lately. Missing classes, showing up with bruises. I had to report him to the guidance counselor last month. I started the car. Which warehouse? Damien pulled up his phone and searched through his student records, finding Trevor's employment information. Dalton Shipping, Building 3. It's about 2 miles from here. We drove fast, too fast, through empty streets. Building 3 of Dalton Shipping was a massive concrete structure with a small parking lot. There was one car there, a gray sedan. Damien inhaled sharply. That's Trevor's car. I've seen it in the school parking lot. I called Detective Harrison as we pulled in, explaining where we were and why. He told us to wait, that they'd send units immediately, but I could hear in Damien's breathing that he wasn't going to wait. His daughter was potentially inside this building, and every second mattered. We got out of the car and approached the main door. It was locked, heavy metal with a keypad. Damien tried the handle anyway, pulling hard, but it didn't budge. We walked around the building looking for another way in. Most of the windows were too high, but around back we found a loading dock with a door that was slightly ajar. We looked at each other, and Damien didn't hesitate, pulling the door open and stepping into darkness. I followed, using my phone flashlight to see. We were in a storage area with shelves of boxes and crates. It smelled like dust and motor oil. "Jules!" Damien called out, his voice echoing. No response. We moved deeper into the building, checking behind shelves and in corners. The building was huge, multiple rooms and corridors. At 2:50 a.m., we'd been searching for 15 minutes when I heard something. A small sound, like crying, coming from somewhere below us. "There's a basement," I said, looking around for stairs. We found a door marked lower level, and it was unlocked. The stairs descended into darkness, and that crying sound got louder. Damien was already running down, taking the steps 2 at a time. I followed, and we emerged into a basement storage area lit by a single bulb. There, in the corner, was Juliet. She was tied to a chair with duct tape over her mouth, her purple backpack on the floor beside her. Her eyes were huge and wet with tears. Damien ran to her, ripping the tape off gently and untying the ropes. Baby, I've got you. You're safe. I've got you. Jules sobbed and wrapped her arms around his neck, and I felt relief so strong it made my knees weak. We'd found her. She was alive. But as I turned to go back up the stairs and wave in the police who should be arriving any moment, I heard a sound behind me. Footsteps. I spun around and saw a figure in the shadows. A man, youngish, watching us. You found her, he said, his voice flat. Took you 3 hours and 50 minutes. Not bad. Damien was still holding Jules, positioning himself between her and the man. Trevor? He asked, recognizing his student. Why would you do this? Trevor stepped into the light, and I saw what Damien had meant about the bruises. His face was marked with healing injuries, one eye still slightly swollen. You reported me, he said to Damien. Got CPS involved, my dad kicked out. You ruined my family. His voice was eerily calm, like he was discussing the weather. So I wanted you to feel what it's like, to have your kid taken away, to not know if you'd get her back. I was already dialing 911, but Trevor saw and pulled something from his pocket. A knife. Don't, he said, and his voice had an edge now. I just wanted him to understand. I wasn't going to hurt her. I gave you 24 hours, that was fair. Damien was backing toward the stairs with Jules in his arms. Trevor, you need help. This isn't you. You're a good kid who's been through something traumatic. But you kidnapped my daughter. You terrified her. That's not okay. Trevor's face crumpled, and suddenly he looked young and lost. My dad's in jail because of you. My mom can't afford our apartment alone. We're being evicted. My whole life fell apart because you couldn't mind your own business. His hand with the knife was shaking. I just wanted you to feel scared like I'm scared all the time now. I heard sirens outside, getting closer. Trevor heard them too, and his expression changed from grief to panic. No. I wasn't going to hurt her. I was going to let her go when the 24 hours was up. You have to tell them I wasn't going to hurt her. But before any of us could respond, police were flooding down the stairs, shouting commands, guns drawn. Trevor dropped the knife and put his hands up, crying now, saying over and over that he wasn't going to hurt anyone. Officers secured him and pulled him away, while others checked on Jules and took statements from Damien and me. Detective Harrison arrived and looked at us with an expression that was equal parts relief and frustration. I told you to wait, he said, but there was no heat in it. You could have been killed. Damien just held Jules tighter. But we weren't, and we found her. That's what matters. Paramedics checked Jules over and said she was physically fine, just scared and dehydrated. They wanted to take her to the hospital for a full evaluation, and Damien climbed into the ambulance with her, not willing to let her out of his sight. I followed in my car, my hands still shaking from adrenaline. It was 3:30 a.m. We'd found her in 4 hours and 30 minutes. We had 19 and a half hours left on the deadline that no longer mattered. At the hospital, doctors examined Jules thoroughly, while Damien stood right beside her, holding her hand. I sat in the waiting room and finally let myself fall apart, just for a minute. Silent tears of relief and leftover terror. Karen, Damien's ex-wife, arrived at the hospital at 6 a.m. on the first flight she could catch from Seattle. She ran into Jules's room and scooped her up, crying and checking her over like the doctors hadn't already confirmed she was okay. Jules was tired and scared, but unharmed. Trevor had given her snacks and water. He'd left her purple backpack with her favorite things. In his disturbed logic, he'd been trying to make a point, not actually hurt her. That didn't make it less traumatic or less illegal, but it explained why Jules was physically fine. Detective Harrison came by around 8 a.m. to take formal statements. Trevor was being charged with kidnapping, child endangerment, and unlawful restraint. He'd be going to jail for a long time. His father? Damien asked. You arrested him for beating Trevor? Detective Harrison nodded. After your report, we investigated and found evidence of long-term abuse. Trevor's father is serving 2 years. We also connected him to assault charges from a bar fight. So Trevor blames me for his father going to jail, Damien said quietly, for his life falling apart. Detective Harrison closed his notebook. Trevor blames you for exposing abuse that needed to be exposed. His father is the one who beat him for years. His father is the one who created this situation. But Trevor can't see that yet. Maybe someday he will. We all sat there processing that. A kid so broken by abuse that he'd lashed out at the person who tried to help him, hurting an innocent child in the process. There was no satisfying ending to this story, just layers of trauma and damage. Jules would need therapy. Trevor would need therapy and jail time. Damien would need to process that trying to help a student had nearly cost him his daughter, and I would need to forget the sight of that knife in Trevor's shaking hand, the calculations I'd been running about whether I could reach him before he could hurt anyone. Karen decided to take Jules home with her even though it was supposed to be Damien's week. I need her with me for a few days, she said, and Damien didn't argue. He understood. They'd work out the details later. Right now, everyone just needed Jules to be safe and feel loved. Monica had been texting updates throughout the night and came to the hospital around 9 a.m. with coffee and breakfast sandwiches nobody wanted. We all just sat there in the waiting room, exhausted and running on adrenaline fumes, waiting for the doctor to finish the last evaluation so Jules could be discharged. Finally, at 10:30 a.m., almost 12 hours after the text that started everything, we were allowed to leave. Karen took Jules to her apartment. Damien and Monica went back to his house to deal with the police who were still processing the crime scene, and I drove home alone, watching the sun come up over familiar streets that felt different now. I couldn't sleep even though I'd been awake for over 24 hours. My mind kept replaying the night, analyzing every decision. What if we hadn't gone to the industrial district? What if Damien hadn't remembered Trevor working there? What if Trevor had decided to hurt Jules instead of just scaring Damien? The what-if spiraled until I felt sick. I called my therapist, a woman named Dr. Reeves who I'd been seeing for anxiety, and left a voicemail explaining what had happened and asking for an emergency session. She called back within an hour and fit me in that afternoon. Sitting in her office, I tried to explain the terror of that countdown, the helplessness of watching minutes tick away while not knowing where to look. You saved her, Dr. Reeves said gently. You and your brother. You didn't give up and you found her in time. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd gotten lucky, that if one thing had gone differently, we'd be planning a funeral instead of celebrating a rescue. Over the next week, the story played out in local news. Teacher's student kidnaps his daughter in revenge plot. The headlines made it sound simple, like a clear cause and effect. Trevor's lawyer issued a statement about his client's mental health struggles and history of abuse. Victim advocates pushed back, saying trauma doesn't excuse traumatizing others. Everyone had opinions about whether Damien should have reported Trevor in the first place, whether the system had failed Trevor by not providing better support after his father's arrest, whether a 17-year-old should be charged as an adult for this crime. I stopped reading the news after day 3. None of the think pieces and hot takes mattered. What mattered was that Jules was safe, getting therapy, slowly returning to normal life with her mom and seeing her dad on supervised visits until she felt comfortable being alone with him again. Damien blamed himself, even though everyone told him not to. I should have seen how angry Trevor was, he said when I visited him 2 weeks after the kidnapping. I should have checked in with him after his dad got arrested, made sure he had support. I reminded him that Trevor had 12 other teachers, a guidance counselor, a social worker assigned to his case. Damien had done his job by reporting the abuse. Everything after that was on the systems that should have caught Trevor before he escalated. But guilt doesn't listen to logic. Damien started seeing a therapist too, working through the trauma of almost losing his daughter and the complicated feelings about a student he'd tried to help turning into someone who hurt him. Monica moved out, saying she couldn't handle the stress and the constant reminders. Damien didn't fight it. I think part of him was relieved to not have to perform being okay around someone. Jules's therapy was helping, but she still had nightmares. Karen called me one night, 3 weeks after the kidnapping, crying. She woke up screaming that she couldn't breathe because of the tape over her mouth. She's 6 years old and she's having panic attacks. What kind of person does this to a 6-year-old? I didn't have an answer. A broken person, maybe. A person who'd been so hurt themselves that they couldn't see the harm they were causing. But that didn't help Jules sleep through the night or feel safe in her own room. Karen asked if I'd testify at Trevor's trial about finding Jules, about the state she was in. I agreed immediately. Whatever it took to make sure he faced consequences and hopefully got the help he needed. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later. In the meantime, Trevor remained in juvenile detention pending psychological evaluation. The prosecutor was arguing to try him as an adult due to the premeditated nature of the crime. Trevor's defense was building a case around his mental state and history of abuse. I tried not to think about it too much, tried to focus on my own life and helping Damien rebuild his. We started a routine where I'd come over every Sunday and we'd cook dinner together, just the two of us. Sometimes we talked about what happened. More often we talked about anything else, sports and movies and work gossip, normal conversations that felt precious now. We'd come so close to losing the ability to have normal conversations ever again. 4 months after the kidnapping, I got a letter forwarded through Detective Harrison. It was from Trevor, handwritten, addressed to me. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won. I want you to know I wasn't going to hurt Jules, he wrote. I know nobody believes me, but it's true. I had snacks for her. I checked on her every hour. I was going to let her go when the time was up. I just wanted Mr. Reeves to feel scared like I've been scared. I wanted him to understand what he did to my family. I know it was wrong. I know I messed up. But I wasn't trying to be a monster. I was just trying to make him understand. The letter went on for 3 pages, circular logic and justifications, and what seemed like genuine remorse mixed with resentment. I showed it to Damien, and he read it silently, then handed it back. He's still not taking responsibility, Damien said. He's still blaming me for the consequences of his father's abuse. The trial happened in November, 6 months after that Friday night text. I testified about finding Jules, about the state of the basement, about Trevor with the knife. Karen testified about Jules's ongoing trauma and therapy. Damien testified about his relationship with Trevor as a student and his decision to report the abuse he'd witnessed. Trevor's lawyer brought expert witnesses to discuss childhood trauma and its impact on decision-making and impulse control. The prosecutor brought experts who said Trevor had planned this for weeks, had bought supplies, had researched how to disable the window screen. This wasn't an impulsive act born of pain. This was calculated revenge. The jury deliberated for 3 days. In the end, they found Trevor guilty on all counts, but recommended leniency in sentencing due to his age and circumstances. He was sentenced to 5 years in a juvenile facility with the possibility of parole after 3 if he completed therapy and showed genuine rehabilitation. Standing outside the courthouse after the sentencing, Karen held Jules's hand. Jules was 7 now, had missed that whole year of normal childhood to trauma and therapy and court proceedings. "Is the bad boy going away?" Jules asked, and Karen nodded. "For a long time, sweetie. He can't hurt you anymore." Jules seemed satisfied with that answer and asked if they could get ice cream. Just like that, ready to move on to normal kid concerns. I envied her resilience, even as I knew it was probably masking deeper processing she'd be doing for years. Damien hugged me in the parking lot. "Thank you," he said, "for that night, for not giving up, for finding her." I hugged him back and didn't say that I'd had moments in that basement where I'd thought we were too late, where I'd imagined what we'd find if Trevor had decided to hurt her. I didn't say I still had nightmares about that countdown clock and all the ways we could have failed. Life slowly returned to normal over the next year. Jules moved back to spending equal time with both parents. Damien started dating someone new, a woman named Chloe who taught art at a different school and knew nothing about Trevor or the kidnapping. I liked her. She was calm and kind and didn't treat Damien like he was broken. I continued therapy with Dr. Reeves, working through my own trauma response and the anxiety that lingered. She taught me techniques for managing the intrusive thoughts, the what-ifs that still popped up. Gradually, they came less frequently. Gradually, I could think about that night without feeling my chest tighten. On the 1-year anniversary of the kidnapping, Damien, Karen, Jules, and I went to dinner together. Just the 4 of us at Jules's favorite restaurant where she ordered chicken fingers and spent the whole meal telling us about her 2nd-grade teacher and her best friend and the chapter book she was reading. Normal kid stuff. Beautiful, ordinary, normal kid stuff. We didn't talk about Trevor or that night. By unspoken agreement, we'd decided to mark the anniversary by celebrating that Jules was here, safe, thriving, despite everything. After dinner, Karen took Jules home, and Damien and I sat in my car in the parking lot. "Do you ever think about how close we came?" he asked. I nodded. "All the time, every day for the first 6 months. Less now, but it still hits me sometimes." Damien was quiet. "I got a letter from Trevor last week," he said. "He's doing well in the facility, going to therapy, working on his GED. His counselor thinks he's making real progress." I didn't know what to say to that. "That's good," I managed. "He deserves a chance to heal and do better." Damien nodded. "He does, but I also hope I never have to see him again." "Is that terrible?" I told him it wasn't terrible. It was human. We could want Trevor to get better and also want him nowhere near our family. Both things could be true. 2 years after the kidnapping, Jules turned 9. She still saw a therapist monthly, but the nightmares had stopped. She was excelling in school and had joined a soccer team. She talked about the kidnapping sometimes in therapy, but never at home, and we followed her lead on that. Trevor got out on parole after serving 3 years. The conditions included staying 500 feet from Jules, Damien, Karen, and their homes at all times. He had to wear a monitoring anklet. He had to continue therapy and maintain employment. One of Damien's co-workers saw him working at a grocery store across town and reported that he looked older, tired, but was polite when helping customers. He'd gotten his GED in the facility and was taking community college classes, rebuilding a life after destroying so much. Appreciate you watching this far. If you enjoyed it, drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story.